glad that Mrs. Beckmann
That makes me sound old.
that Roberta, she came up to me a number of months ago and said if you would be interested, I'd be glad to talk to your men's group some morning. And it is an honor. We've known you a long time.
Long time.
And you've been very helpful to us different stages in our life, especially when Ernestine was sick. But to know that you're nursing, you're counseling, you're an author, you do all kinds of stuff. I even know that you played the drums at one point in time. But Roberta's been a member of Asbury for quite a while and was the director of the counseling center for 20 years, right?
Yep.
And so if she can't help us understand this, then we're in trouble, guys.
We've been in trouble for years.
But she's our last best hope, I think. So anyway, Roberta,
Boy, that's a lot of pressure. Whew, I'll have to straighten all you men out.
but we're glad you're here and thank you, and you come on up and share with us.
Well, thank you for having me. I will not have all the answers, I can promise you, so you'll go home just as confused as you were when you came, I can promise you that. Yeah, just looking at this was drawn by a man. I want you to know that it was not drawn by a woman, so don't be mad at me. So, but it's just kind of a funny on how we differ, but it's not really accurate, but it's just kind of a funny. So if you see on the male side, the big center box is sex, and then look at the little commitment modular, and then down here the little listening particle, and also to the right the remote control addiction center. So you can kind of just compare them. On the female, you see where they have a need for commitment and communication, and their sex particle is way down there, real tiny. So anyway, you can take it home and look at it, and also the second handout is why it's great to be a male fact. So you can just take it home and read it. I'm not going to go over it. So.
I'm going to tell Ernestine that this is what you're talking about.
Then you have to answer all the questions she's going to have. So, well, what I'm going to talk about today is in 4 different areas, and I'm just going to briefly touch on them, so you're not going to be here all morning, I promise. I'm going to talk about the differences between physical, communication, emotional, and spiritual between men and women. And I would like to say that probably what I say is about 90% correct, because there's always an exception to every rule. Even when research is done, there's always an exception to it. So kind of take it with a grain of salt when I go through it and you go, well, that's not me. That doesn't happen in my family. So just take it with a grain of salt. The first thing I want to talk about is the physical differences. One of the first differences is that women need more touches than men. And they show that they need about 9 to 10 touches a day. And when I was teaching premarital classes here, it was really funny because the guys would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, there's your touches for the day. Well, that's not exactly what it means. What it means is throughout the day, they need hand holding, they need pats on the shoulder, maybe a back rub or whatever, but they need about 8 to 10 touches a day. And we know overall that touching is healthy, that we are healthier if we touch people. Blood pressure goes down. We know migraines aren't quite as active. We know ulcerative colitis. A lot of diseases, if we have more touching, the immunity goes up. And so that's really interesting. So we all need touches, but women especially need touches. With the brain, men brain are about 10% larger than women on a whole. Their skull is thicker. We know that, don't we? Their skin is thinner than women. And with the blood sugar, women's blood sugar drops before men's. So if you are traveling with a woman in the car and she says, I think I need to have dinner and have something to eat, you will have a happy person if you pull over and feed them, because their blood sugar will drop before yours. So kind of remember that, because I think that's important unless you want a grumpy wife. Women have more insulating cells, and so she will gain weight quicker, and it is harder for her to lose weight. So if you go on a diet together, you will lose weight sooner than she will. So, and that makes women a little unhappy. So, men are more competitive and they conquer things. So if you see a man that wants to go shopping, they go hunting. They go into the store, they know what they want to buy, they shoot it, they take it home. Women go into the store, they want to look at every store, everything in the store, and so that's a big difference between men and women. And men, on being competitive, even when they go on vacation, a lot of times, they are militants. We will leave at 6 o'clock in the morning. The van gas tank will be full. Your bladder will be empty. We will not stop until the gas tank is empty and your bladder is full. So they're just, and they are made to be competitive because they were made to protect the family. And so that's okay that you're competitive. One of the differences in the brain is that women have more connective tissues from the right to the left side of the brain. And so they tie everything to emotions that way because they have that connective tissue, and they are better at reasoning and intuition. So if their intuition says something, you ought to probably listen to them because they have that connective tissue that makes them better at intuition. Men's connective tissue goes from the front to the back, and so that makes them more perceptive and take action. And that's a good thing because God made them that way, to take actions to protect the family. You know, it used to be that the man would go out, hunt, bring dinner home, and the woman was just happy to have him home. Nowadays, they want him to communicate much more than they were generations before. But God made him to take action. So, and that's partly because of the connective tissue. One of the interesting things on the research they did was that men can go through a route to find a place easier than women. They can navigate a route. And women, it's interesting though, because once a woman has been through that route, she can make it better the second time than the man because she pays attention to all the details. She will notice the purple house on the corner, the mailbox over here, the white fence here, and so when she goes back through the route, she can find it a little bit easier than man. But overall, men do a better job finding the route. The other thing is that men do better with space. And so women, when they're riding with you, they'll say, oh, you're too close to that car, or you're too close to the curve, because her spatial effects aren't as good as yours. So if she's saying, oh, you're too close to the car, you just look at her and say, Roberta says you don't know what you're talking about. So Mark said that'll go over well. So all the women will come up to me and hate me, right? But it's a true fact that they do not judge space as well. Women on the whole have more depression than men, and that's because of their hormones. And especially as they get older and they go through menopause and things. So women do have more depression on a whole. So that's kind of a little bit of the physical differences. You know, we have physical differences we know by just looking at each other, but that's kind of some of the internal differences between men and women. Communication. Well, we know that women speak more words than men on a whole. Now, there is a difference with that sometimes, and personalities will play into that, because I know some men that talk more than women. I can name a few in this room. Won't name anybody. But on a whole, a woman will speak about 12,000 words a day, and a man will speak about 25,000 words a day. And so what happens is a lot of times they'll go to work and speak their 25,000 or their 12,000, and they come home and she's only spoke about her half of her 12,000, and she needs another rest of the 25,000, and so she wants to talk when he just wants to kind of veg out. So sometimes that can be a problem. But women process problems that way by talking, and so you need to let them talk. They did a research and they watched with little baby girls and little baby boys, and in the nursery little baby girls started moving their jaws right away before boys did.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So, And they put a microphone on 4-year-olds, and what they found was that little girls, when they communicated, 100% of it was words, and when little boys communicated, 50% of it was words and 50% were sounds, like of cars and sirens and that sort of thing. So right off the bat, God made us to talk more than men. And like one lady told me, well, of course, because the men never listen, so we have to repeat everything, so that's why we get the 25,000 words. So, but you know, women are like a flower. If you want to nurture her, let her communicate. And men, I saw it described as they're like a camel. You can give them a little bit of conversation and they can go days in that desert without any more conversation. So, well, there's a really neat book called Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti by the Farrells. And what they say is that men process things like a waffle. And you know, waffles have little squares in it. So men go to that little square and focus on one thing to do that one thing good. And they will stay in the boxes where they feel most successful. If they're successful at work, they'll stay in that little box. If they're successful at gardening, they'll come and do that little box. If they do well at maybe remodeling the house, they'll stay in that little box. But they will only do one box at a time. Well, what they find is that some of those boxes are empty. So what happens is if they come home from work, they sit down on the couch and they want to be in that empty box. They don't want anybody talking to them. They're sitting in front of the TV, vegging out, watching just anything on TV just to kind of debrief themselves from the day. What happens is the woman walks in and says, he's sitting there, this is a good time to talk. So she'll say, hey, can we talk? And that's probably not the best time. He just wants to be in his little empty box. So, well, women are like spaghetti. They will intertwine all their feelings and everything like spaghetti. So they'll start over here, and this is an example. The lady comes home and says, honey, I got a promotion today. I am so glad that our boss treats men and women like they should on equal pay. And honey, I'm so glad you and your partner treat women with respect. And you know, I saw your partner's wife today, and we got together and said maybe we ought to get together and have a game night. And you know, our girls play soccer together, and they just enjoy each other, so we should have them over. Well, he's gotten lost. He's back here. He has no idea how she's gotten over here with the kids playing soccer. And he's back here thinking, she got a promotion. I wonder if that means better finances that we're going to have, you know. So sometimes you have to follow with them as they go with spaghetti, and you have to track with them. Now, if you are a lion in personality and you're thinking, get to the point, sometimes if you've got an obsessive wife that talks, you got to go, would you jump from A to Z and give me your point? So, but anyway, go with them as much as you can on that spaghetti tour. So, and because they can do that, they can multitask. Women can better than men. So women usually can do 3 things at one time. She can be talking on the phone, stirring something for dinner, and having a baby on her hip. Well, a man, he gets lost with that. He usually just has to do one little task at a time. And along with that, you know, women remember everything because it's all intertwined. And you know that you can't win an argument a lot of times because they remember everything. And one of the things that young couples make a mistake is that they bring everything from the past up into the arguments now. And one of the things I really encourage the couples is, if you've had a disagreement in the past, solve it, forget it, and move on. Don't keep bringing the past into the future. But sometimes women make a mistake in doing that. But they can multitask, and men, it's interesting because men don't like to make lists like women do, but they think they're going to remember everything, but they don't necessarily remember everything. And a true story, a man and a woman were going to go on a cruise the next day, and he had a lot of errands to run that day to get some things done before they went on a cruise. And she asked him to stop by the cleaners to pick up the clothes that she was going to pack to go on the cruise. And she said to him, don't you think you need to write these things down so you don't forget them? Oh no, I'll remember them. So he went and ran his errands, and when he got home, guess what he had forgotten? He had forgotten to go by the cleaners to get the clothes, and the cleaners was closed. So sometimes if the woman suggests that you might need to write things down to remember it, you might need to write things down. So.
Especially when you get older.
Yeah, yeah, I write everything down now, don't I? Yeah. So, but anyway, go on the journey with her in the communication. Don't cut her off if you don't have to. And the way it feels to her is like if you're sitting in front of the TV and watching K-State and KU play basketball and it's tied with 2 minutes left, and she walks into the room and turns the TV off. That's how it feels to her if you cut her off with the communication at times. So go with her on the journey. The other difference between the men and women is sometimes comments that are said by men, to them it's like a pebble in their pond, but to them, the women, it feels like a boulder. So example, if she comes out and she goes, honey, is this dress a little too tight? Well, you know right away you can't win with that question, can you? You need to just say, you look great, honey. But if you say something like, yeah, it might be a little tight, it feels like a pebble to you, but to her it feels like a big boulder. And she blows it out of proportion and goes, oh my gosh, I'm going to be the only one that has an ugly dress there, but it's going to look nice. My husband doesn't love me anymore because I'm getting fat. And she kind of blows it out of proportion. Form small groups easier than men, and they're more social. They like to go out for teas and lunch and that sort of thing. And I think this is wonderful that you guys do this, because I think it is important for you to have groups. And if you don't believe that, watch. If you go out to eat with some couples and a woman gets up to go to the powder room, 3 or 4 other women get up and go to the powder room with her. If a man gets up and goes to the restroom, you don't see 3 or 4 men get up and go to the restroom with him. So that's the difference in the women do form groups more so than men. Men communicate with other men with competitions usually. You know, they'll go play racquetball, they'll go play golf, they'll do things like that, and that's how they socialize. Women socialize with talking. So, well, with communication, women need to hear, I love you, and that needs to be said more than once. And we know in the Old Testament, Solomon on his wedding night said it 56 times. So I don't know that you have to say it 56 times, but you do need to tell your wife every so often, your spouse, that you love them. So emotionally, let's look at some of the things that we differ in emotions. Men usually share facts, women usually share feelings. And again, a personality makes a difference. If you're an extrovert, you are energized by people being around you. If you are an introvert, you are energized by having quiet time and having space. And so you kind of have to go with personality on the emotional part. But again, women recognize a great relationship, and they are like a marriage manual, and they will tell a couple when if the marriage is getting in trouble, because they are more tuned into the marriage. When I was doing marriage counseling, one of the things I would have them do is the couple would come in and I would have them take a piece of paper, and on a scale of 1 to 10, mark where you think your marriage is, 10 being very great. And it was interesting because 100% of the time, the man always rated the marriage higher than the woman. And partly that's because the woman is tuned in more to the feelings part of the marriage and what's going on in the marriage. So again, women handle stress by talking about it. Men handle it by going to the cave and just kind of debriefing themselves. So the number one thing that women need in a marriage, besides love, is security. They've done a whole bunch of tests, and they always mark security right up there at the top. Security in knowing that the man's not going to leave the marriage, that the man's going to be there to take care of them, and that they will always be in that relationship. And just a personal note, one of the things that you as men can do that have a wife at home is prepare your wife for your death. And that simply means Does your wife know where all the finances are, all the paperwork? Do they know how to handle things if you die tomorrow? My husband was sick 30 days before he passed away from cancer. And in those 30 days, he was too sick to be able to tell me those things, but he had prepared me ahead of time. He had told me where I needed to go to find out about the finances and who I needed to talk to, where the trust was or your will is. All those things you need to go over with your wife now. That helps her to feel secure. I have a notebook now that I have it filled out for my boys so that they will know where everything is. And the only thing that we could not find was the deed to the house. And I looked and I looked and looked for months for the deed to the house. And we were going to sell, we had 2 houses and we were going to sell the one, but I couldn't find the deed to the house. And I finally found it in the income tax. Yeah. Years ago, income tax. I mean, like 10 years ago. So don't hide your deed in the income tax. But anyway, have those things organized and let your wife know where they are so that she is going to be secure that if something happens to you, she can carry on. And let your children know where some of those things are. If you have a son that can be in charge, let them know where some of those things are, and your power of attorney for health and that sort of thing. That helps them feel secure. So the number one thing that men need besides love is respect. And they need to hear, you are doing a good job. Thank you for providing for our family. Thank you for helping with the kids. They need the respect, and so women forget sometimes to give them that respect. So, and it's interesting, men, if their wife is happy, they take credit for everything. Yes, I picked that movie. Yes, I picked that restaurant. I'm glad you liked that restaurant. And that's just because they have the need to be respected and be the leadership. So anyway, that's kind of emotional, how we are different. And again, women emotionally have more depression than men. Moving on to the spiritual, you know, and you as godly men know that you are the leadership of your home. And that means even when you are raising your children, to get your children to church, to have devotions with them, to teach them about prayer and the Bible and Scripture. That is your responsibility. And it's interesting, I found a difference when I first started 30 years ago of doing counseling to the last few years. The young men don't want to be the leadership of the home. And I would say to them, you know, what does it mean to be the spiritual leader of the home? And they don't want it. They said, well, we're a team. We work together. And I said, I know you're a team and you should be a team. But there are times when a decision has to be made, and if you can't make it, that's the time the man has to step up and make the decision, and the wife has to be submissive. And we have changed those roles. Women don't want to do that. They don't want to be submissive. They don't want the man to make the decision. But God made it that way so we don't have chaos in the family. If there's never a decision made, you live in chaos. So the man needs to be the head of the family. I appreciated that about my husband. He, taught our boys, and they are now teaching their children. And 5 of my grandkids have been baptized. The only one that hasn't been baptized is the 7-year-old. But he's getting there because he's in Awana, which is a wonderful program here at the church. And Awana has led a lot of these kids to Christ. So if you ever want to do something really good, mentor in Awana. So, but anyway, men need to pray, but women are the prayer warriors a lot of times in the family. And if you ever want to see heaven come down to earth, you see a woman that's praying for her kids. When I worked with the kids that were dying with cancer, it was the mother that was on her knees praying for those little kids. And you could see the power of the prayer. So again, hopefully that you are the leader of your family and have been the leader of your family. Women and men need to pray for each other. Wife and husbands need to pray for each other. And even if you don't sit and pray at that time together, you can ask your wife, what do I need to pray for you? What would you like for me to pray for you? And the other thing you can ask him is, what goal or dream did you have when you were younger that maybe you haven't reached that you would like to reach now? Because a lot of times women set aside some of their dreams to raise the children and to nurture the husband. And once those children are grown, there may be some dreams or goals that your wife still wants to reach. And your, I think, responsibility is to help them finish that line or reach those goals if you possibly can. So again, pray for each other and see, what you need to pray for each other. Again, the wife will live up to how she is treasured. So, being the leadership and the godly father and grandfather in the family, you are passing on a heritage to your next generation. I grew up in a family where we had at least five generations of Christians. I was blessed. And my husband, Paul, was raised in a family where he had 4 or 5 generations of Christians that was passed down from generation to generation. Now, I know some of you didn't grow up that way. Some of you probably didn't. Maybe you are the first generation of Christians. What I would encourage you is that you can pass it on still to your children and grandchildren. You can start that cycle for the generations to come. It talks about in Psalm 78 how you are to teach your children and the next generation. Psalms 112 talks about that the generation of the upright will be blessed, his descendants will be mighty on earth. And Joel 1:3 said, let your children tell their children and their children another generation. So again, even if you didn't have children, you can pass on your faith to other generations by just mentoring young men or being involved in Sunday school or Awana or something like that. But I hope that a lot of you are grandfathers, maybe some of you great-grandfathers. I hope you're praying for your grandkids. It is so difficult out there today for these kids. So you should be praying every day for your grandkids. So pass it on to the next generation. So one of the things is that I think that we have missed the boat as a society is to get these young kids to realize that God created them the way He wants them to be, and that we need to celebrate that. And there is a difference between men and women, and we need to celebrate that. These young kids today are so confused with the transgender things going on, with the homosexuality going on. These kids are so confused. I was talking to my daughter-in-law last night, and she is a counselor at a middle school here in Wichita, and she had a 6th grader come in yesterday and was confused about her sexuality. She didn't know whether she wanted to be male or female. And she's a 6th grader. And my daughter-in-law said, why are you confused about this? And she said, well, the kids tell me I'm gay. Well, adolescents in middle school, their brains are crazy anyway, and they shouldn't be making any decisions at that age. But we have really, as a society, we have confused these kids. And the new term now is asexual. That means they don't want to be male or female. So if you see a female that's got her head shaved, she's probably in that area of asexual. They don't want to be either. So we have really confused them. So again, the church needs to step up and tell the children and the youth, we need to be teaching them, you are special the way God made you. Male and female is the way that He has created us. And it says that in Genesis 1:26 and 27. So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him, male and female. The other scripture in Psalms 139 says, for you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. And again, we need to get these young kids to realize that they are wonderful the way they were created and the way God meant them to be. So Pray over your grandchildren that they will understand who they are. In 1 Corinthians 2:12, it talks about how God gives us His Spirit so we know Him and understand all He has given us, including His purpose. So we need to know, these children need to know their purpose as a male and as a female, and we need to let society not determine what they are to be. So I say celebrate, being men. And when I speak to women, I say celebrate being women. But it does help a little bit if you understand the difference between men and women. So that's all I kind of have to say. I want to know if you have any questions or comments.
Somebody got something.
Yeah, I know I didn't answer all your questions. I know that.
I think what you said about the sexuality uproar that's going on, I'm not sure, dealing with it and just reassuring them. It's just all out in front of me, and I just haven't had to deal with it yet, but I see it around me about what the little girl said. She didn't know what she was.
Yeah. And I think, again, that's where our churches have fallen down a little bit in society and the Christian community. We have fallen down in not being able to say, celebrate who you are. Enjoy who you are. God made you the way you are. Find out what your gifts and talents are and use that. So, yeah, I think and it is out there. You see it. My kids, I've got some in high school and my grandkids and some in middle school, and they're dealing with it all the time at school now. So, and of course it didn't help when they did the bathrooms, the unisex bathrooms where, in the schools, boys and girls can use the same bathroom. That doesn't help. So, any other comments?
Kids are in too big a hurry anyway.
They're too big to grow in a hurry to grow up. Oh, yeah. Well, the TV doesn't help, and all the social media doesn't help. That's a problem.
When they have this feeling, do you tell them it's wrong, or do you direct them to their born gender, or what?
Well,
A lot of this, that's going on.
yeah.
But how do you counsel them?
Well, in schools, you can't. I mean, like Amy just told the little gal that, you're too young to be deciding any of those. Those are too big of questions, you got to learn to be happy with who you are, and that's about as far as she can go, because you definitely don't counsel them in any Christian scripture in the schools, public schools. Me as a Christian counselor here at church, I can pull out scriptures like and just say, this is how God created you. He wants you to be this way. So, and I've always done it in an accepting way, because it doesn't help to be angry with them or mean with them or, judgmental with them, because you want them to become a Christian and know God. And so you have to be, it's a fine line on what you say to them. You have to love them. But yeah, Dick?
We could also say those little kids, okay, the little kids are telling you that you're gay, or how much of an expert are they? The little kid, you tell somebody else that they know the difference.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the problem nowadays is homosexuals try to recruit kids. And so that's a real problem, yeah.
Does one sex or the other have a greater propensity to misuse drugs, illicit prescription medicine, alcohol?
I don't know that there's been studies that way, but I do think on a whole that men are a little bit more, have addictive personalities, and part of that is that they have served in the army or service sometimes, and sometimes they get into drinking during the service or coming home. Post-traumatic stress syndrome gets them into some addictive behaviors. So I would guess it's a little higher with men, but I think it's increasing on women now. We find that alcoholism is gradually increasing on women. So, and again, it goes back to your family history. If you have a long history of alcoholism in your family, you are prone more to be an alcoholic just because of the genetic makeup of your body. And so you have to kind of look at your history and see if there was alcoholism in the, and if there is, you know, you even tell your kids or grandkids to never pick up that first drink and teach them that there is a lot of alcoholism in the family. Yeah. So, other questions? Well, thank you for letting me come, and don't go home and tell your wives that you know everything now. No.
Yeah, there'll be a test at home.
Yeah. The
you.
wives will ask you questions, you know. Yeah, there's a test every day.
Every day. Thank you, Roberta.